Good morning everyone, and a very warm welcome to London and to Lancaster House. I'm delighted to welcome you here and thank you very much for coming. This is not just the largest gathering of countries and organizations that has ever come together to discuss Somalia. I also believe it is the most influential. We have leading figures from governments in every continent of the world. We have leading organizations from the African Union and the European Union to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and, of course, the United Nations. But most importantly of all, we have Somali delegations representing almost every region of Somalia that is not under terrorist control. So I want to say very clearly why I've asked you all here today and what I believe we can achieve together. First, why we are all here. For 2 decades, Somalia has been torn apart by famine, by bloodshed, and by some of the worst poverty on our planet. As many as 1 million people have died. The terrible scenes that we all saw with the famine last year were truly heartbreaking, with death and suffering on a scale that no country and no people should ever have to suffer in our modern world. Earlier this week, I met with some of the Somali diaspora, British Somalis, living here in Britain. Many had fled from fighting and famine, and they had grave concerns for their relatives left behind. Now, of course, it is natural to want to help any country in such distress, but there is another reason for the international community to help the Somali people, and that is because the problems in Somalia don't just affect Somalia, they affect us all. In a country where there is so little hope, where there is chaos and violence and terrorism, pirates are disrupting vital trade routes and kidnapping tourists. Young minds are being poisoned by radicalism, breeding terrorism that is threatening not just Somalia but the whole world. If the rest of us just sit back and look on, we will pay a price for doing so. So as an international community, it is in all our interests to try and help the Somali people to address these problems. And yet for 2 decades, politicians in the West have too often dismissed the problems in Somalia as simply too difficult and too remote to deal with. Engagement has been sporadic and half-hearted, and that fatalism has failed Somalia, and it has failed the international community too. So today we have an unprecedented opportunity to change that. And I believe there is real momentum right now. International aid has pulled Somalia back from the brink of humanitarian crisis. Thanks to the extraordinary bravery of African and Somali troops, the city of Mogadishu, once beautiful, now a bullet hole-ridden city, has been recovered from al-Shabaab. And despite the huge challenges still ahead, when the British Foreign Secretary visited Mogadishu, he saw growing confidence returning to those streets. Shops reopening, homes being rebuilt, a city beginning to get back on its feet again. Crucially, across the country, al-Shabaab are losing the support of ordinary Somalis because they tried to stop vital food supplies reaching their fellow countrymen. The final piece of momentum, and the most important piece of momentum, is the steps that the Somalis themselves are taking to ensure there is proper, representative and accountable government. That is why they're ending the mandate of the transitional federal government, and the meetings at Garowe have made real progress in taking that forward. And to me, that is the most important part of all, because ultimately the problems in Somalia can only be solved by the Somali people. So we are not here to impose solutions on a country from afar, nor are we here to tell you, the Somali people, what to do. But we are here to help get behind you, to get behind your efforts to turn things around. I believe if everyone comes together and does their bit, I'm absolutely convinced that Somalia can solve its problems and ultimately fulfill its potential as a key player in Africa and in the world. So let me turn to how we do that, and specifically what we want to achieve at this conference. There's no single magic solution that will make all the difference. It is about the patient work of helping the Somali people to rebuild their country from the bottom up. Now, to me, that means 3 things. First, helping to build security through a strengthened African Union peacekeeping operation. Second, getting humanitarian aid and development support where it is needed. And third, ensuring that Somali efforts to create a representative government are backed by real international commitment. I want to take each one briefly in turn. First, security. I want to see an African Union mission that has the resources to put al-Shabaab permanently into retreat, and that also takes seriously its responsibility to protect civilians. The first outcome of this conference, if you like, actually happened yesterday. The United Nations Security Council agreed a UK-led resolution to extend the mandate of the African Union peacekeepers beyond Mogadishu and to increase the number of troops from 12,000 to 17,700. This is a major step forward, and I'm grateful for the support of many of the countries represented here for their help in reaching that resolution yesterday. Building security also means keeping up the pressure on the pirates. Mauritius, Tanzania, and the Seychelles have agreed to take pirates as prisoners. Somaliland has agreed to take back convicted pirates. The United Arab Emirates have provided $15 million to strengthen the Seychelles Coast Guard. Denmark and Japan are also major bilateral donors, with Japan leading work to improve information sharing throughout the region on maritime safety and security. And vitally, the UK and the Netherlands are supporting the Seychelles to establish a regional centre for coordinating intelligence and pursuing the leaders and the financiers of piracy. I was delighted yesterday to sign the UK's agreement with President Michel of the Seychelles yesterday. So we want to build on these efforts today with further agreements for the trial and detention of pirates. Let's create an international task force on ransoms, and let us set the ultimate ambition of stopping these payments, because ultimately we must ensure that crime does not pay. Second, the humanitarian aid and development support. Now, aid has helped save the lives of 750,000 people affected by famine last year. It has fed 2.6 million people across Somalia and provided emergency assistance to many more. I'm proud the British government has been the second largest bilateral aid donor, and the British people themselves have made a big contribution. But while the famine may be technically over in Somalia, there are still 2.3 million people in urgent need of emergency assistance. Somalia's recovery is in a very fragile state. So it's critical that greater security leads to more humanitarian aid getting through to those who need it, and also that we provide more support to those who fled Somalia for Kenya and Ethiopia, and who are also in desperate need of further help. Britain is today providing a further £51 million over 3 years for refugees in Kenya and in Ethiopia. But it's not enough just to give emergency aid. We need to help Somalis get back on their feet. What matters most to ordinary Somalis is what matters to all of us: finding a job, supporting our families, making sure their children are properly fed and educated. This means providing them with long-term agricultural development assistance that will not only help them survive the lean season, but actually put themselves and their families on the path to sustainability and self-sufficiency. And it means bringing in new resources to promote stability and prosperity in all parts of Somalia. So I'm delighted that Denmark, Norway, the United Arab Emirates, and the Netherlands are joining us today in setting up a local stability fund that will provide support to previously neglected regions, including those emerging from conflict or from terrorist control. This will facilitate local people building a network of safer, better governed areas that can gradually put the squeeze on those areas still held by al-Shabaab. I hope that other countries may be able to help support this local stability fund over the coming weeks. Third and finally, a reinvigorated political process. Unless we can help the people of Somalia to build a stable future, the problems will keep reoccurring. The only way to address the causes of piracy and terrorism is to back local efforts to forge a new peace deal, ensuring that people from across Somalia have a voice in how their country is run. So most importantly, I hope this conference will forge a new momentum to put in place the building blocks of a more stable country, getting behind the efforts of Somalis themselves to turn things around. That momentum is already being seen. Just last week, a second meeting in Garowe produced a major step forward towards replacing the transitional federal institutions when their mandate ends in August. Principles for reform have been hammered out by the Somalis themselves, with agreement on the selection criteria for the Independent Interim Electoral Commission and the National Constituent Assembly. Somalia is, I believe, within reach of a new political process that would involve all Somalis and ultimately a new government truly accountable to the demands of its people, and properly representative of all Somalia's regions. I'm delighted that we have with us, for the first time today, the presidents of almost all those regions. It is vital that this whole process is as inclusive as possible, with a constituent assembly chosen by the Somali people, leading to a more representative government. And it is equally vital that this whole process sticks to the firm timetable, so that when the transitional federal government ends in August, there is no danger of a power vacuum. And we must do all we can to support this today. Finally, the success of the new political process depends upon trust. All over the world, people want governments that are effective, that are fair, and that are free from corruption. This point was made to me over and over again by representatives of the more than 200,000 Somalis who've made their home here in Britain. So we're helping to improve transparency and accountability by establishing a joint financial management board, through which donors will work with the Somali government to help make sure that revenue from key assets and international aid is used for the good of Somali people. In my meeting with members of the Somali diaspora here in Britain on Monday, one young lady said to me, "It's all about having a job and a voice." That is what so many Somalis dream of for their homeland. A Somalia where hunger no longer holds thousands in its grip, where extremism no longer holds sway, where Somali children hold books and not guns, and where women can give birth safely, have a job and a voice in their political future. Today, I hope, is the next stage of a long journey for Somalia and its people. But our message to the people of Somalia is that we believe in you. We back you in trying to fix your problems. So let us make this conference the turning point in helping the Somali people to reclaim their country, and with that, to achieve greater stability and prosperity for Somalia, for the region, and for the world.